Everybody, thanks for watching. So real quick, I want to get into this video. So I talked before about, understanding DNA and how we came into existence and how the information surrounding that is not what it seems. There's a lot of information out there, of course, about how we crawled out of primordial soup and how cyanobacteria is basically the beginning of all life forms. And then we have Darwin and evolution. And a lot of people like to go off of the Big Bang and evolution as far as how we're getting our understanding of how we came into existence. So I want to shed some light on this whole thing. And I put out videos about this before, but it's a lot more to get into when trying to make this connection and this understanding about how we came to be and what DNA plays a role and how DNA plays a role in how we come to exist, especially on the whole chromosome level. As far as it's becoming male and female, it's a whole lot with that whole thing. So the first reptile-like creatures to crawl out of the primordial soup were mammaliomorphs, right? So these were cold-blooded animals, and they came from a group called Amniotes, right? So these would be basically before we start having animals with internal reproductive systems, right? So amniotes. So with these animals, it wasn't like sex wasn't determined based upon, DNA or genetics or what have you. So the gender would be determined based upon the incubation temperature of the egg. So if an egg is incubated at a certain temperature, that's what would determine sex, right? So far with these amniotes, right? With these mammaliomorphs. So we have this, and we have these animals crawling out of the primordial soup. Right. And this is their interpretation, not mine. This is what they've given us. I want to make sure I break down what's being said and what's on the record. So on the record, we have mammaliomorphs from a group called amniotes. And these are egg producing animals, right? Where the sex is determined based upon the temperature of the egg. Now, this is until we get warm blooded animals that basically start, producing internally. And, the situation changes right here. So we have the egg-producing mammals or egg-producing reptiles, let's say, and then we have the internal reproductive organs of a mammal. So now we have the rhapsids, and the rhapsids would basically branch off from these reptile-like creatures and would eventually become mammals. Mammals are not evolved from reptiles, but they do share common ancestors. Mammals, as well as birds, are a part of the amniotes group. Right. So we have the amniotes group, which basically evolved from an amphibious ancestor. Right. So again, we go back to that whole primordial soup thing to where we have the cyanobacteria, and it's the first, organism that we know that use photosynthesis, which is the process of turning light into food. So we have this, again, cyanobacteria crawling out of the primordial soup, giving life to reptiles and animals and mammals or what have you. And this is how we begin the whole climb up to human beings. And again, this is the explanation that they have given us over the years. But it's important to understand because there's a lot of holes in this whole thing. So now during this time where we have the mammals coming into existence, the mammals evolving basically, we have a pair of autosomes that begin to evolve and it would eventually give us the X and Y chromosome. Now, the X and Y chromosome we know is important because this is where we get male and female. We know the female carry 2 X chromosomes and the male carry an X and Y chromosome. Now, when a child is, being created, the woman gives the X chromosome, the male would give either the X or the Y chromosome. If a male gives the X chromosome, 2 X's, we have a female. If he gives the Y, an X and a Y, we have a male, right? So important. So they're trying to say the infancy, the beginning of this genetic, or let's say this gender creation happened sometime around where we have mammals coming into existence and we have this evolution, this evolving, or let's just call it a mutation of autosomes, which autosomes would basically be, pairs of chromosomes. And these autosomes basically evolving and giving us these X and Y chromosome. Now, it's important because, again, as I talk about in previous videos, it's understanding that if, the question would be, if a man comes from a woman, right, and a woman has 2 X chromosome, the man has the X and Y chromosome, where did the Y chromosome come from if he came from a woman, right? So if the Y would make it uniquely male, where did it come from if there was no male and we only get male as far as human male from the double X from the female. So where did the Y come from? And that's the big question mark, right? So you have to look at the whole thing and just understand the interpretation that they've been giving us over the years of how this stuff came to be. Sounds like a crazy science experiment to me, but it's a lot more to it. So now translocation is basically when genetic material gets moved in between chromosomes, right? So this is what they say happened. And it happened over a long period of time. In the first instance, they believe happened over 300 million years ago, right? So we have that. So we know that, both male and female, we have 46 chromosomes, right? We have 23 pairs of chromosomes. So that's in both male and female. So 22 of those pairs of chromosomes are basically non-sex chromosomes. The 23rd pair would be the sex chromosome, right? So that would give us the double X chromosome and the XY chromosome in male. Of course, double X in female, as I said before, right? So now the SRY gene is the sex determining region, right? Y gene. It says here, we come a long way in our understanding of sexual dimorphism since 355 BC. In those days, Aristotle suggested that the differences between the two sexes was due to the heat of semen at the time of copulation. Hot semen generated males, whereas cold semen made females. We know where we get that from, what I talked about with the eggs being incubated at a certain temperature. And that's probably where that came from. Thankfully, we now know a little more about the molecular events of sex determination. Usually, a woman has two X chromosomes, the double X, and a man one X chromosome and Y, XY. However, both male and female characteristics can sometimes be found in one individual, and it is possible to have XY women and XX men. And this is something I've been talking about before. Analysis of such individuals have revealed some of the molecules involved in sex determination, including one called SRY, which is important for testis formation. SRY, which stands for sex determining region, Y gene, is found on the Y chromosome in the cell. It binds to other DNA and in doing so distorts it dramatically out of shape. This alters the properties of the DNA and likely alters the expression of a number of genes, leading to testis formation. Most double X men who lack a Y chromosome do still have a copy of the SRY region in one of their X chromosomes. This copy accounts for their maleness. However, because the remainder of the Y chromosome is missing, they frequently do not develop secondary sexual characteristics in the usual way. Since human SRY is similar to SRY of mice, a model of SRY function has been developed in mice. This has been particularly important in discovering the interactions of SRY with other genes in male sex determination. So what does this sound like? It sounds like the whole explanation I've been giving you guys over the years and what Ivan von Sertova talked about when he was saying how men are just mutations of women, right? So testes will be dropped ovaries, right? Or our penis would basically be an elongated clitoris, and we have breasts. So this is the same thing it's talking about. And it's giving you the mutation, but as I told you guys before, this is in the medical dictionary. So what it's talking about here with the SRY and understanding what this is about is, again, when you just pay attention to the jargon, it's giving you an understanding how someone can be homosexual, right? Plain and simple. You can see it right then and there. It's genetic. Again, if people don't understand that a straight male, in no way, if you're a straight male, there's no way you're going to be attracted to another male if you're a straight male. There has to be something genetic with that. And it's something that we know is genetic and we know how the whole thing comes about. But of course, they're not going to release it to the public because then you can't use it to keep the people separate. But clear as day, right there. So whenever we're getting into evolution, it's the same stuff that comes up. It's always a common ancestor, common ancestor. And I broke the whole thing down before when giving you guys the evolution chart, right? So in that whole thing, I showed you guys how we're supposedly having a common ancestor. We don't evolve from primates or chimps, that we share a common ancestor. We don't know what the common ancestor is. It's the whole missing link theory, right? But the whole thing is, again, when you look at their evolution chart, there's no way they should be able to give us anything past that missing link if they don't know what the missing link is. So if you don't have the missing link, you don't know what it is. How do you know that the Asian Homo erectus, all these other beings came into existence if you don't understand what was before them or what that missing link is? And when you look at the chart, Homo australopithecus africanus, we have the Lucy and the missing link, Homo erectus, Homo sapien, the Homo heidelbergensis, the Neanderthal, and then, of course, Homo sapiens, right? So, again, this thing was first really put together so they could say that white people were here first, because early humans were supposed to have mated with Neanderthals, and that's how Europeans came to be. But if you look on the chart or you go through the understanding, they give you early humans and they give you modern humans, right? So Homo sapiens is supposed to come from modern humans, which Homo sapiens is supposed to be, where African people come from. So again, if you believe the whole Neanderthal theory or what have you, you would have to believe also that Europeans were here first, or their ancestors was here first, meaning that they were here first, and we are a part of the modern humans group, not the early humans group. So what have they been telling us for years? They've been telling us that Europeans, Asians, they have Neanderthal DNA, right? The African people do not. Trying to make it like we are just this separate people. We are not human, and the real humans supposedly have to be mixed with Neanderthals, right? But Africans don't have this mixture, right? Now, what came and bust this whole thing up? As I talked about before, I gave you Dr. Keith Chang and his whole discovery with the gene that he found that caused a genetic mutation. He found it in zebrafish first. So Dr. Keith Chang basically found the genetic mutation that occurred and basically changed dark skin into light skin. And they've been trying to get around this whole thing for a long time. So we had Dr. Keith Chang put that out. We have the actual mutation. So there is no debate for anybody who don't want to believe it. We have the mutation. So we have that. We have TED come out and do multiple TED Talks on the same thing, basically telling the world that, hey, Africans was here first and you people basically evolved or mutated from black skin. And I showed you guys all of the proof that comes with the whole thing with OCA, which is ocular cutaneous albinism, right? So with OCA, you have different traits of OCA. Africans are the only people to carry every single trait of OCA, and OCA is hereditary. Every race has OCA. So if OCA is hereditary and Africans are the only race to carry every single trait, what does that tell you? Africans are mommy and daddy, right? So you get this, or the other races get this from this whole hereditary trait, right? So we have OCA. Then we have ocular cutaneous albinism, OCA. We have vitiligo, which would be a trait of that mutation, right? Where you've seen dark skin turn into white skin. You never seen white skin turn into black skin, right? So we have everything in place to show you that this genetic mutation happened. We have the mutation itself. We have the traits that exist in society today with vitiligo, with albinism, right? So we have this. So they had to backtrack because now the Neanderthal thing don't make sense. Because if we have this whole thing to where we can say that the Africans was here and that, we have white skin, we evolved. Now they're trying to make it mix. They're trying to make it like, well, you had some white people basically evolve or mutate from black people. Then you had others that basically came through the route of Neanderthals. Now, for years, again, I talked about this before in many videos, they've been saying this. They've been harping on it. Africans do not have any Neanderthal DNA, right? And now they got to backtrack. So here it is. Now it says, for 10 years, geneticists have told the story of how Neanderthals, or at least their DNA sequences, live on in today's Europeans, Asians, and their descendants. Not so in Africans, the story goes, because modern humans and our extinct cousins interbred only outside of Africa. A new study overturns that notion, revealing an unexpectedly large amount of Neanderthal ancestry in modern populations across Africa. It suggests much of that DNA came from Europeans migrating back into Africa over the past 20,000 years. So understand, even with that, what does that mean? Now they're trying to say that these Europeans came back into Africa and somehow created us, right? And when they backtrack, and they got to backtrack. They messed this up so much. They got rid of so many of the posts that was online because I had them. They're not there no more. So they had to get rid of a lot of this stuff. You can't even find it online no more. So they got rid of a bunch of that stuff. They got rid of a lot of the information the Smithsonian put out, because Smithsonian got to backtrack because they have all this Neanderthal stuff put out there. And obviously they clearly trying to say that these were, white folks, and white folks came first, because when you look at all their depictions of Neanderthals, this is what you get.